Welcome to the May 6, 2024 meeting of Troy City Council. We ask if you have any cell phones, please silence them during the meeting. And please stand for invocation and pledge by Mrs. Westphal tonight.
Heavenly Father, we ask you to look over all of us here tonight, guide our leaders, guide our council members in their decision-making, and allow us to continue to have a great city. In your holy name, we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Knight, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Sneed.
Here.
Mrs. Marshall.
Here.
Mrs. Westphal.
Here.
Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Schilling.
Here.
Mr. Twist.
Here.
Mr. Sievert.
Here.
Mr. Whidden.
Here.
Mr. Pierce.
Present.
All members of council are present.
Thank you. At this time, first thing on our agenda is recognition of the outgoing members of the Troy Mayor's Youth Council. Mayor Odo.
Looks like the whole council's resigning.
I think a lot of people wish we would. Maybe. Probably.
This is our last meeting with everybody together, and we're all a little sad about that. Our last meeting, we couldn't believe that the year had gone so fast. And, I'm always kind of sad to hear that, because we had such a great time. What was your favorite thing this year? Don't act shy now. Waka? Waka. Building Waka. Levi? Ice skating. Nobody broke any bones. We had a good time this year, you guys. Parents, you've done a great job with your kids. We had such a good time. I kind of like the scavenger hunt around downtown. That was a really good thing. Hope you got your pictures from Abby. So I'm going to hand out gift certificates, not gift certificates.
Looks like a gift from the mayor.
Thank you, guys. And you're right here on top, so here you go. And there's a little thing on back. I'll come back to you. Evelyn's not here. Vaughn is not here. Eleanor, no. Goodness, Liam, right here. Joan, we're seeing Lauren's here. Sarah, Amani, I saw. No. Lily, here. Lane, no. Alex, Delilah, no. Emerson. Take a look at what's on back.
What?
$5 gift certificate. They can do a box at Grandpa's Road and during the scavenger hunt. They were like, we want to go to Grandpa Joe's. We want to. I said, no, can't do that.
Or Frosty's Caves, I don't know.
Jada.
We'll get the certificates to the rest of them, but you guys have been a joy this year. We've had so much fun. Keep in mind, Team Leadership Joy comes up your junior year high school. But, thank you for participating, parents. Thank you all for getting the kids to the meetings, for picking them up. We had such a great time. Gonna miss you guys. If you see me out in town, say hi. I'll be looking for you. Thank you.
because David won't be there tonight, but Grant has got with us all year too. Grant? No certificate or anything.
That's quite all right.
Yeah. Yeah. You're one of the grandpa jokes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, did you get a $5 certificate?
I worked all year for that.
Hey, Grant, just tell them you're gonna work about it, and just take it off when you give it to them, since they weren't here. That brings us to our public hearing we have tonight. Mrs. Knight.
Yes, this will be a public hearing on ordinance number 018-2024, an ordinance amending certain sections of the zoning code of the city of Troy overlay district.
Anyone that wishes to speak in favor of that ordinance, please come forward, give your name and typical thing, name and information, and say what you have to say. Seeing none in favor, anyone opposed? Hearing's closed. This ordinance will get referred to the Law and Ordinance Committee, and that'll meet on May 13th to provide recommendation to council regarding that ordinance. That committee meeting is at 6 p.m. here. So if you want to make comments, come and make comments then, you're welcome to do that as well. That brings us to summary of the minutes. Mrs. Knight, could you please read the summary of the minutes for April 15th of council?
Minutes of council, April 15th, 2024. There was a presentation from Rumpke to the Recycling Award winner and an announcement of the new Hefty Renew program by Rumpke. Committee reports. Community and Economic Development Committee recommended that legislation be prepared dedicating a utility easement along North Dorset Road related to Addison Landing subdivision. Committee recommended legislation be prepared amending the professional services agreement with American Structure Point to update the subdivision regulations. Committee recommended legislation be prepared to approve the final record plan of Phase 2 of the Villas of Halifax subdivision and Patty O. Homes plan development as recommended by the Planning Commission. Committee recommended the legislation be prepared accepting the dedication of 0.124 acres of current in-lot 11365 located along McCaig Road as right-of-way. Finance Committee recommended that legislation be prepared authorizing a bidding for the recycling program. Personnel Committee recommended that legislation be prepared amending a salary ordinance to establish a clerk typist as a part-time position in the cemetery department. Law and Ordinance Committee reported regarding a liquor license that had been transmitted to the city. Resolution number R17, 2024, bid for the curbside recycling program, first reading and adopted. Resolution number R18, 2024, amending professional services agreement, American Structure Point, for the addition of the subdivision regulations review, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 014, 2024, accepting the McCaig Road replat, dedication of right-of-way, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 015, 2024, accepting a utility easement along North Dorset Road, was given first reading and was adopted. Ordinance number 016, 2024, final record plan Phase 2 Halifax, the Villas of Halifax subdivision and patio homes plan development, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 017, 2024, amending salary ordinance for part-time clerk, cemetery department, first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 018, 2024, amending the zoning code related to DRO district, first reading. There was a presentation on the fair housing program, following other comments, council adjourned at 7:57.
Motion to approve? Second.
Motion to approve the minutes by Mr. Whidden, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Please call the roll. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. Westphal?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you. That takes us to committee reports, and we'll start tonight with Building and Utilities Committee. Mr. Pierce.
Thank you. Committee members Smee and Pierce met April 29th to consider the payment of oversizing costs related to the sewer lift station in Addison Landing subdivision. Ordinances and subdivision regulations provide that when the city determines that a utility line lift station is to be installed at a larger size than the minimum necessary for the benefit of the city and not for the benefit of the subdivision, the city shall pay the difference of the excess of the cost of the minimum requirements. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to pay an amount not to exceed $900,000 to Lytle Road Developers Limited as an Ohio limited liability company of Miamisburg, Ohio, for the city's sewer oversizing cost for the sewer lift station that benefit the city of Troy and not just the Addison Landing subdivision. Committee supports emergency legislation so that work can commence on this subdivision during the construction season, and due to the lead time needed for the ordering of the lift station equipment, it is noted that a reappropriation may be required by the city auditor at some point for the additional cost. Respectfully submitted by Bobby Phillips, Councilman Bobby Phillips, Councilwoman Lynn Snee, and myself as chair, Samuel Pierce.
Any questions or comments? Continue.
Thank you. The committee members, Snee and Pierce, met April 29th to consider authorizing a new water agreement between the City of Troy, Miami County, and West Milton. Troy provides water to West Milton at a 10% surcharge over the rates charged Troy customers. It is the recommendation of this committee that the legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into a water agreement with the Board of County Commissioners of Miami County, Ohio, and the municipality of West Milton, Ohio, for Troy to provide water for West Milton. Committee supports emergency legislation as the prior agreement has expired. Respectfully submitted by Councilman Bobby Phillips, Councilwoman Lynn Snee, and myself, Samuel Pierce, as Chair of Buildings and Utilities Committee.
Any questions on that one? Mr. Pierce. You got third one?
Say what?
You got 2 or 3?
2.
That'll take us to Community and Economic Development Committee. Mr. Schilling.
Thank you, Mr. President. This committee met April 29th to consider extending by an additional 180 days the current moratorium on the granting of any permits allowing adult use cannabis operators to establish within the city of Troy. The extension will allow staff time to review and make recommendations of adequate regulations on this issue. It is a recommendation of the committee that the legislation be prepared extending by an additional 180 days the moratorium on the granting of any permits allowing adult use cannabis operators to establish within the city of Troy. This committee supports emergency legislation so that there is no lapse in the moratorium, as the current moratorium expires on June 1st, 2024. And this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself, Jeff Schilling, as chair.
Questions, comments? Thank you. Takes us to Finance. Mr. Sievert.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first one I have is South Stanfield Reconstruction Project Phase 2. Committee members Sievert and Schilling met April 29 to consider a resolution of necessity related to the installation of sidewalks and a shared use path within the South Stanfield Road Reconstruction Project Phase 2. This will then allow for notification to the property owners regarding the estimated assessments. It is the recommendation of this committee that the resolution of necessity be prepared related to the sidewalks and shared use path portion of the South Stanfield Road Reconstruction Phase 2. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Schilling, Ms. Westfall, and myself as chairman of the Finance Committee. The second report is relative to the Downtown Facade Improvement Grant Program. Committee members Schilling and Sievert met April 29th regarding establishing a 2024 Downtown Facade Improvement Grant Program. The program would be very similar to the one approved in 2021 for owners of non-residential properties in the downtown to apply for funds for facade improvements and other eligible exterior renovations. The program funding and general guidelines are discussed in the detailed report. And just for the notice of the people in the audience, that would include money from the general fund, the ARPA funds. We are getting money from the Troy Main Street and also from the Troy Reinvestment Fund for a total of $120,000. Therefore, it is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared establishing the 2024 Downtown Facade Improvement Grant Program in the amount of $120,000, and that the appropriation of the program be included in the reappropriation legislation as necessary so that the program can be announced as soon as possible and eligible applicants benefits from the program to continue their investments in downtown. The committee supports emergency legislation. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Schilling, Ms. Westfall, and myself as chairman.
Any questions and comments over either one of those reports?
I have a question.
Mr. Pierce.
Thank you. In it said it was for non-residential. If it is an apartment up above, that's for residential usage, and commercial activity down low, business is...
We consider that a mixed use. This is in the central downtown like it was in 2022, so there were properties that were mixed use properties, so they certainly could apply.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right. That brings us to the citizens' comments. At this point in time, you have 2 minutes if you'd like to come up and address anything that's on the agenda tonight. Mr. Kerber will be our designated timekeeper. Seeing when everyone's so eager to come up and talk to us, we will move on to resolutions. Mrs. Knight, could you read Resolution 19-2024, please?
Resolution number R19, 2024, a resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to enter into a water agreement with the municipality of West Milton and the Board of Miami County Commissioners and declaring an emergency. This is the first reading.
Move to suspend. Second.
Motion to suspend the reading is by Mr. Sievert, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Westfall?
Yeah, that would do that then, yeah.
Okay, I'm abstaining for personal reasons.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Sievert, seconded by Mr. Twist. Mrs. Knight, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. Westfall?
Abstaining.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, could you read Resolution R2024, please?
Resolution number R2024, resolution declaring the necessity of new and replacement sidewalks, shared use path, as part of the South Stanfield Road Reconstruction Project Phase 2 in the city of Troy, Ohio. This is the first reading. Following the adoption of this resolution, if adopted, the property owners affected would be notified. First reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Motion to suspend the rules is by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Pierce. Please read the roll. Please call the roll, Mrs. Knight.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snead?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. Westfall?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Move to adopt.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Whidden, seconded by Mr. Sievert. Please call the roll.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. Westfall?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, could you please Resolution R 2024?
Resolution number R 2024, resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to establish a 2024 downtown facade improvement grant program and declaring an emergency. The grant program will be in the amount of $120,000, money from the Troy General Fund, City ARPA Fund, contribution of Troy Main Street, and contribution from the Troy Foundation. This is the first reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. Westfall?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Second.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Whidden, seconded by Mrs. Snee. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. Westfall?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Mrs. Knight, could we please read ordinance O 18-2024, please?
Ordinance number O-18-2024, an ordinance amending sections 1143.13, 1143.14, 1143.15, and 1143.18 of the zoning code of the City of Troy, Ohio. These are zoning code amendments related to the DRO provisions. This had a public hearing this evening, has been recommended by the Troy Planning Commission, will be the subject of a committee meeting next Monday.
Thank you. Could you please read ordinance O 19-2024, please?
Ordinance number O-19-2024, ordinance opposing a moratorium for a period of 180 days on the granting of any permits allowing adult-use cannabis operators from establishing within the City of Troy, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. This is the first reading, and this would be an extension of the current moratorium.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Motion to move to suspend by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. excuse me, Pierce. Mrs. Knight, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. Westfall?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Please call the roll, Mrs. Knight.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. Westfall?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Could you please read our last ordinance for the evening? O 20-2024.
Ordinance number O-2024, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to make payment to Lytle Road Developers Limited, an Ohio limited liability company, for the oversizing of a sewer lift station and related sewer line oversizing for the Addison Landing subdivision and declaring an emergency. This would be a cost not to exceed $900,000. First reading.
Move to suspend.
Second.
Motion to suspend by Mr. Pierce, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Mrs. Knight, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Marshall?
Yes.
Mrs. Westfall?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Move to adopt. Second.
Move to adopt by Mr. Whidden, seconded by Mr. Pierce. Mrs. Knight, could you please call the roll?
Mrs. Westfall?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Twist?
Yes.
Mr. Sievert?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Ms. Marshall?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Communications and announcements. Do we have any, Mrs. Knight?
We do not, but I would note that there are some members of Leadership Troy that are here this evening.
Would they like to come up, stand, or be identified, or they just want to
Wait.
sit and observe?
Have them stand up.
I recognize one of them in the back.
Mr. Hughes there. Mrs. Sievert. Have you had fun so far? Yes. Good. All right.
They'll be with us on Wednesday.
We'll see you Wednesday. Mayor Oda, do you have any comments? Mayor? Do you have-
I'm sorry, no, I do not have anything.
Director of Public Service and Safety.
Just a couple of things. First of all, to announce that we had mentioned a May public meeting to discuss the streetscape safety proposed project. That date has been set. It will be May 22nd, 6 p.m. at the Bravo Room. Tomorrow we will be pushing that out through our typical media, social media, as well as on our website, of course, and we will be emailing all of those that have contacted us or who were in attendance at the first meeting and left their email. And we'll continue to push that out until May 22nd.
Thank you.
The second item, I'd ask Mrs. Colley if she would stand, please. Just wanted to introduce, for those who haven't met her yet, Charlotte Colley. She's been the interim assistant director since the beginning of January. Mark Wendling took I think he'd call it a promotion to our insurance pool, executive director, president, CEO, I don't know, king, I don't know what he calls himself. But Charlotte comes to us with 18 years in various roles in city, county government. As I mentioned, she's been the interim since January. She was hired permanently, effective last Monday. Last Monday was her first day. And she is married with 3 children. She does live in Miami County in West Milton. I won't give her address, but she is a county resident and has been for quite some time now. So introduce Charlotte, and please make her feel welcome. Welcome. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Kerber.
I have nothing for the good of the council this evening, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. Friggy.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have nothing at this time.
Any council members?
Bill,
Mr. Twist.
I was really wondering when trick or treat was, but
It's too early yet.
too early. Okay. But on a serious note, I do appreciate all the support from the city and community of my father passing away unexpectedly a couple weeks ago. He was a great man, and really appreciate all the support people have given. And just wanted to say thank you to those that have donated to Partners in Hope in lieu of flowers. They said they got quite a bit, so just appreciate the community supporting such a good organization. But thank you.
Anyone else? Staff, any questions or comments? I'll give a big speech or? Okay. That gets us to audience comments. Anybody want to speak? Come forward, name and address, info for Mrs. Knight.
My name's Chad Morgan. I live at 1114 Long Street. That area's ran down. I see meth heads walking down the street all the time. I've sent many of you pictures of pipes I found in my yard. You see the playground equipment at the parks. You know the woods over there by Floor Acre Apartment is full of crime. I am fed up with this. It's to the point where I just saw a dude I caught stealing off my property, finally got out of jail, and I straight rolled down my window. I catch it again, I'm going to jail. The cops are always on Ray Street at a certain house 3 or 4 times a day, or 3 or 4 times a week, and nothing's done. I'm fed up. I've wrote several of you about the issues over there, and nothing is done. It's frustrating. I know I'm going to be retaliated against for this, and I'm fine. I mean, you know I'm already unhappy about my driveway, and I'm paying $5,000 for that. And it's frustrating to see this going on in a neighborhood. I mean, I caught the dude beating on one door at one property. At 10 o'clock at night, I walked out and said, good thing you didn't get shot. 6 days later, I caught him on another property that I own, and he said, why are you following me around? This needs to stop in this neighborhood. We need to take our neighborhood back. It's frustrating. It's not helping my anxiety. So, I mean, it's to the point where I tell my neighbors, even if you call report a stolen bike, you get the cop tell you it's only a bike, why report it? I know several of you got pictures from me of the playground equipment, and I'm just fed up. And if I'm the only one that's going to be up here talking, you'll see me every time. Because, I mean, it says right there, Troy, Ohio, make it yours. Every time I've tried to make it mine, I've been retaliated against, either by law enforcement or somebody. You will see me up here every time there's a meeting. When Parks Department has their meeting tomorrow, if I'm not being there, I will be there. Even if I'm in my work clothes, even if I'm not supposed to be, I will be there. I am fed up. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Whitten?
I'm not familiar. What's the issue with the parks?
Well, I've been walking my neighbor's dog to help me with my health problems. And I walk over to Boyer Park, graffiti everywhere. You walk over to the park over at Dad's Carryout, every piece of equipment spray painted. This is our neighborhood. I mean, I'd rather live in Hollywood right now. Hollywood used to be the place not to live. And now I'd rather go to Hollywood to live than live back there. It's frustrating. And it seems like you guys just turn a blind eye. I mean, several of you know the cops are at certain houses 4 times a week, 5 times a week, same houses. Nothing's done. That's all I have to say.
Just a moment, Mr. President, if I may ask a question. Mr. Morgan, have you talked to any of your neighbors about a neighborhood watch or anything like that?
Well, my neighbors, now that I found out certain neighbors have cameras, so the person that's been on my property, he has a court order to stay away from my properties, but nobody wants to get involved. Certain people, you'll see posts, people are unhappy back there, people are frustrated back there, but I'm the only one here standing and talking. And right now, it's not the easiest thing for me to do.
Well, I do appreciate that. I will say that if the police are showing up at the residence, they are doing something. It may not be the result that you like, but they do have legal things to deal with.
Oh, I know, but it's the same group of people. It's the same row of houses all the time.
I'm sympathetic to that, but sometimes the landlord, if they are rentals.
It's a Habitat for Humanity house.
Okay. Then I don't know whether Habitat knows about it.
I reported it to them. It pretty much went in one ear, out the other.
Right. Well, unfortunately, there is policy and procedure, and that needs to be followed.
I mean, like the woods, I keep getting smoke blown at me that stuff is going to happen about the woods over by the Floral Apartments. There's always people, foot traffic going back in there. There was somebody on Facebook, we'd go back there and drink beer, and there's beer cans all. I had someone sent me pictures, and I got accused of trespass back there. Because I forwarded them someone on city council. And they said, what are you doing back there? That's trespass. How did you get them pictures? But the owner don't want to take care of that property. The owner told me, because I tracked down the owner, told me that the eventual plan is to cut down all the woods, sell it to ConAgra. That's what he wants to do. But there's a shack back there. God knows they're doing their drugs back there. I see them walk back there 4 or 5 times a day. I mean, it's different people. I see kids go back in there. Eventually, you're going to find a body back there. I mean, I have other citizens sending me video clips of people grabbing stuff in midair that's not even there because they're so strung out. The dude that just got out of jail, he would talk to sticks. This needs to be handled. It's frustrating. I know the east side of Troy is not the most glamorous side of Troy, but I'm fed up. And like we say, we report stuff. One of my neighbors reported a meth pipe he found in his driveway. He was told just throw it away. My thing is, Troy Police Department can deal with that. I'm not just going to throw it in my trash can because you might think I have a drug problem. I am at my boiling point with them. Like when I see a police and at that house, I'll roll down the window and say, "Another nice day in the meth neighborhood." It needs to stop. It needs to come to the end. You guys see it all the time walking up through downtown. I mean, it is what it is.
Thank you.
My name is Bradley Bering. I reside at 105 Crestwood Drive, and I'm coming tonight to talk about the streetscape on the Square project because fortunately, I should say unfortunately/fortunately, I'm going to be out of town on the 22nd doing disaster work in Eaton, western Kentucky. I think this project is ill-advised for 2 reasons. The current setup of the public square has worked for over 30 years. So why are we changing it? Why are we changing it to put 2 lanes back on the east side of the square when most of you in this room are old enough to recall when that circle had 2 lanes all the way around, and you had to yield to the right, and woe be it if you ever got stuck on the inside lane because you couldn't get out. Hold on 1 second.
You disobeyed the rules.
I know.
Yep.
Your time's up.
Thanks, John. I thought I had it set on silent. I set it on silent. Tried to set it on silent before I come up here. Sorry about that. I just think this is a very ill-advised project. It doesn't need to be done. This has turned from a pedestrian safety project into something that it's not. You can have all the meetings you want in the world, but it doesn't change the fact that this is an ill-conceived, ill-timed project. The square has worked for 30 years. I don't think we need to change it. Now, I don't know what stakeholders you would think that this is a good idea, but if you look at the...
One more time, Brad, and you're done.
Give me 2 seconds here, Bill.
It's a $50 fine in court, Brad.
I'm trying. There it is. All right. Now, where was I? Anyways. I like your sense of humor, John. I like your sense of humor.
Brad, you got about 30 more
seconds.
seconds.
All right. You can't put time on this, Bill. Sorry. This is my time. And I'm going to take it. So, thank you.
Then get to it.
I'll thank you to just let me take my time, Bill. Don't try to shut me down unless you want trouble of a legal kind. As I said, this is a bad idea. We don't need to put 2 lanes back in on that east side. It's not going to do any good. It's just going to tie traffic back up the way it was. So I'm hoping that this will be changed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. Ben Southerly, President of the Troy Historic Preservation Alliance, 110.5 West Main Street in Troy. Lots happened since I was up here last. West Main Street is open after nearly 10 months. The sidewalks open after more than 4 years and 3 months. And May is Preservation Month. So I can think of no better time to stand before you and acknowledge that one of Troy and Miami County's most historic buildings no longer faces the threat of demolition. Thanks to a successful stabilization project funded 100% by 334 individual households, businesses, and organizations. It's a win-win-win for our community and a powerful testament to what can happen when collaboration is given a chance. This would not have been possible without the support of our donors, the expertise and devotion of Mike Twist, Mac Ray, Wes Driscoll, and the rest of the solution-oriented team at Level MB and all of their contractors, the legal expertise of Jeremy Tome, Wade Tome, and Eberly, and of THPA attorney Kelly Schroeder, and the tenacity of the Troy Historic Preservation Alliance. Our downtown owes its beauty and charm to its historic integrity. These old buildings are assets that tell authentic stories about who we are as a community. They are vital to its future. The past 4 years should leave no doubt that there are many, many citizens in our community willing to go to the mat for our downtown. The latest event in our Dine to Donate series will be held on Thursday, May 23rd at Leaf and Vine. Our formal fundraising efforts officially wrapped up last week, with commitments so far totaling more than $820,000. Individuals, businesses, and organizations that would like to contribute, though, toward the stabilization project and be recognized in a display that's planned for the building can contribute at www.thpatroy.org through June 30th, 2024. THPA continues to do some non-stabilization work on the building, including repairs to a one-story addition on the east side of the old courthouse. Over the next couple of months, our focus will be on repairing the building's windows. Many people have asked us what our plans are for the building. We've been very clear that we are not interested in waging another battle over whether this building should stay or go. It is staying, and we will place an easement on the property as part of our commitment to donors. Folks have also asked us if we plan to keep the building. THPA is a nonprofit organization focused on advocacy and education. We are not interested long-term in being landlords. One can reasonably expect that at a time yet to be determined, we will sell the building to a new owner that takes downtown Troy's culture of stewardship seriously. Not only that, but we will ensure the building is in the hands of someone with the financial wherewithal needed to bring the building fully back into active use. THPA and others have worked far too hard to save this building, only to have it languish. No doubt, a lot of work lies ahead for the IOF building and Old Miami County Courthouse. And there's a lot of work that needs to happen elsewhere. There's a need to mend fences. There's a need for the City of Troy and downtown stakeholders to come together and collaborate. It was great to see tonight that the City Council approved another downtown facade improvement program, grant program to spur additional investment in our downtown. Thank you. When it comes to our downtown, we need to look deeper than the building facades. We need to diagnose the root causes of the debacle that played out on West Main Street. One of those root causes, without a doubt, is the fact that downtown stakeholders are not represented at this dais when significant decisions are made about the future of downtown buildings. This downtown disconnect is holding our city back, and it needs to be addressed. Now that the building has been stabilized, this disconnect has THPA's full and undivided attention. We are looking forward to dialogue among multiple downtown stakeholders and ultimately a collaborative solution. More on that to come. For now, though, I come tonight simply to acknowledge how our community can benefit when many people come together for a common cause. If I might briefly put on a different hat, as president of the board of the Overfield Tavern Museum, I would like to extend an invitation to all of you to visit the museum this spring or summer. The museum has its first new exhibit in at least a decade, focusing on Troy and Miami County's earliest years prior to the opening of the Miami-Erie Canal in 1837. Our executive director, Chris Manning, has done an amazing job pulling together this exhibit, which was sponsored by a generous grant from the Troy Foundation. A lot of history has literally been unearthed for this exhibit, thanks to an archaeological dig north of Troy at the homestead of Judge William Barbie, one of Troy and Miami County's earliest judges, who actually heard cases at the Overfield Tavern back when it served as the Miami County Courthouse between 1808 and 1811. In addition, you'll see some amazing sketches by Thomas Wharton that include the earliest view of Troy from 1831. It really is a cool exhibit. It is included in the $3 admission to the museum, so if you have family or friends in town, the Overfield Tavern is a great place to visit, and if you have young children or grandchildren in tow, it's a very friendly place for them, with activities and projects geared specifically for kids. The museum is open on Saturdays and Sundays from 1 to 4, and on Wednesdays from 9 to noon. Are there any questions I can answer? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sadler. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Heather Sturgill. I live at 323 East Main Street, here in Troy. And so I haven't lived here long, but one of the things that I really like about the people that I've met so far is the strong sense of fairness. If people recognize that something seems unfair, they want to get involved and make it right, usually. And I know this isn't a specific local city issue, but here's where people go to learn about things and get involved in things. So I want to draw your attention to the fact that some companies are exploiting something called corporate personhood. Back in May 10th of 1886, I know, a long time ago, the Supreme Court established that under the 14th Amendment, a corporation is a person with equal protection of the laws, in the case called Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad. Now, since that time, corporations have pushed the concept to the point that they're now getting all of the rights and benefits of personhood, but my problem is that they're not having to face any of the consequences. The biggest case in point is First Energy, now called Energy Harbor. The actions of people on behalf of that company caused the biggest bribery scandal in Ohio history. And only flesh and blood people have faced the consequences of that. A couple of employees and some elected officials have gotten or might get some jail time. But the company has still been free to operate business as usual and even be awarded sweetheart aggregation contracts, including from Troy. There isn't corporate jail or corporate death penalty, anything like that. The most that ever happens to corporations is a fine. And quite frankly, that's just rolled in the cost of doing business and sometimes even taken off their taxes as an expense. And while this isn't directly a city issue, we can spread the word about supporting the We the People amendments At the federal level, it's called House Joint Resolution 54, and at the state level, it's called House Resolution 56. So, May being the birth month of this issue, might be a good idea to contact your elected officials at the federal and state level and tell them to support those resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? We are adjourned. Next meeting is May 20th, I think.